Throughout history, there are always two stories that are told side by side. The foreground, often told with the most elaborate details. The other side is the background, often not told at all. The foreground is filled with the notable people and the notable events. The background can be a silent place, filled with a constant flow of ordinary people just doing ordinary things. In 1620, a small group of Christian Puritans who originated from the small town of Scrooby in Nottinghamshire made the transition from the background into the foreground. Without seeking to, and certainly without realising it in their time, and without intending it, they became pioneers and pilgrims that changed the history of the world. But who were they, really? Why did they sail from Southampton in 1620 aboard this ship called the Mayflower? What is their story? These are the Mayflower Monologues.
We were to set sail for a new world and a new beginning. But our story doesn't start here. No, this is just a moment in time, a verse of a rhyme, the next step on a journey that started way back. You could say it started in 1533, when the great King Henry VIII broke away from the church in Rome and established the throne as the head of a new church, the Church of England. Or perhaps it started with Bloody Mary in the 1550s as she returned the land back to the Catholic Church, and people soon learned if you disobeyed, you got burned. So people started to lose faith in religion. Or maybe it started with Elizabeth as she swung us back to the Anglican Church, but many of us got left in the lurch as she allowed some of the power and structure of Rome to remain. I mean, this is really where our story begins. Like many, what we saw in the Bible didn't match with what we saw in our churches, so a plan was hatched. We would no longer just sit in silence. The manor house in Scrooby had been our meeting place, but now the case against us was gathering pace and we were not safe to continue here. The Strong Act was passed, making it illegal to attend any church that would not bend its knees to the rules laid down by Queen Elizabeth. Then King James called the Hampton Conference and issued the 141 rules for clergy to follow. But we were not fools. We would not be bound by this religious hierarchy. The Church of God should be pure and clean. We read in 2 Corinthians chapter 6 verse 17, "You shall come out from among them and be thee separate." And now we were desperate to do just that. We were Puritans who wanted to clean up the mess of God's church that had digressed from being true to what we saw in His Word, and now we felt spurred on to seek a new land, a freedom to worship without fear of arrest. And so we thought it best to move to Holland in search of our promised land.
I am an English lady, born here, lived here all my life through plenty, through strife, and I have worshipped my God here in many ways down the years. But now we must leave. I know it's the only way. I know it's what we must do. I believe it is true, and I trust that the Lord is with us in this. He will prosper our efforts because they are simple. I know, but it's so hard to go, to pack up and leave my homeland for Holland and to build a life there. And not just for me and for William, my spouse, as we must sell most possessions, get rid of our house, but for our children. Dear Jonathan, Patience and Fear, how can I make it clear what is happening to us? And so it was in the late autumn of 1607 we began our flight to Holland in search of our heaven here on earth. William found a sea captain he thought he could trust, who advised that we must make our way to the Lincolnshire port of Boston and a place called Scotia Creek. We were weary and weak, as it was 60 miles by small boat, days and nights afloat out into the Trent at Gainsborough and then the Foss Dyke to Lincoln. Families with children, some not old enough to understand what had been planned and the adventure we were starting. We approached the creek, sailed past merchant ships, careful to watch for any tidal rips that could catch us off guard and change our course. Then, there it was, the ship of our dreams, the sails and the beams of the vessel that would carry us into our freedom. Excitement and fear bubbling up strong inside, but this dream would soon be shattered. The captain had lied. Before we had even left the creek, he turned on us. Our plan was leaked. All of us, women and children as well, were ransacked and robbed by those headed for hell. We were dragged from the ship, and by force we were taken into the town of Boston, fearful and shaken, to be made a spectacle of. All of us, women and children as well. All of us, abandoned there, left for the authorities to come and find us. Many were arrested. They came with chains to bind us. The women and children then allowed to leave freely and return back to Scrooby with a warning about the lesson they hoped we had learned. Some of our men were held for a time before release, but not without a warning that rebellion must cease. Some spent a month in that Boston jail. We didn't accept defeat. If anything, we grew stronger, refusing to wait much longer, determined to find another way to a day when, loosed from the chains of oppression and blame, at liberty to choose our own way to worship.
So as outlaws now, we lived on the edge, but staying true to our pledge to escape these shores. And so in the spring of 1608, we tempted fate in defiance. Once more, breaking the law, we crossed the North Sea to Holland. But Amsterdam, which we had hoped would be home, became just a pause, and we continued to roam. We headed south to the city of Leiden, and it became clear that it was here that we could make a new start, with a sense in our heart that we could hang up our boots and put down some roots, leave behind constraining religion, and bring to birth our new vision. Many took up a practical trade as masons and carpenters, whatever job paid, all the while worshipping freely. Released from fear, we continued for many a year in a stable condition and our God-given mission, enjoying sweet and delightful society in spiritual comfort and unity. But our comfort and safety were fragile, and so while we worshipped and worked, we were always unsure of just how secure our new lives would be. That I had been elected to lead and to spiritually feed the believers that gathered to worship in Leiden.
I became renowned. I was often found in the university debating with colleagues who, in the matters of theology, just couldn't see eye to eye, and there was a real sense of things becoming tense. In Holland, there were no restrictions on the printed word, and so we felt spurred on to use this opportunity to spread our message far and wide. William Brewster, who had been appointed to assist me here in the church, couldn't resist about writing about King James and how our beloved England just wasn't the same since he had come to the throne. He caused quite a stir with some of his publications, which caused much consternation for His Majesty back home. So much so that he ended up being pursued for some of the things he'd written about the king, and so the only thing he could do was to run into hiding.
I had been teaching English at the University of Leiden for a number of years, but things weren't all we'd hoped for here. Our children were becoming more and more like the Dutch, inasmuch as they were copying their behaviours and conforming to their ways of life that conflicted with ours. I couldn't stay silent about what King James had been doing. A desire to speak out started brewing, and so I wrote and printed, along with Thomas Brewer, no fewer than 8 books against the regime of the Church of England, and this was just 1618. But our words were starting to be seen by those responsible for the state of the church that had been left in the lurch by the head of the church, King James I, and now we had a thirst for writing some more. In 1619 we printed the pages of a book called Perth Assembly, which would rattle the cages, again of the hierarchy of those in power. Then came the hour that the king himself snapped. He ordered a manhunt across many a nation. I went under cover in trepidation of being hunted and caught and chained by the hand, delivered for punishment back in my homeland. This was seen as treason against country and king, and they wanted to bring us in. Death by hanging is what we would face, which was why we laid low and moved from place to place, evading the king's men, until when we got word that the rest of the church were discussing a change, and there was many a thing needing to be arranged. I could only do so much to offer a hand, and eventually I travelled undercover back to England and awaited more news about the plans they were made. But never did my hope or my faith in God fade. I kept on believing, trusting, and never did I doubt He would guide us and bless our endeavour.
Now the Lord said unto Abram, Get thee from thy country, and from thy family, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee, and I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and I will curse them that curseth thee. And in thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed.
We had wished to create a heaven on earth, but Holland was no longer the place to bring this to birth. You see, another land was calling to us much further afield, and if we would yield to the longing to go, it would be for good, with no chance ever to return. Our bridges we'd burn. The Americas would be a blank canvas. No established religion to force and impose its traditions on us, and so a desire rose. A new hope was born to meet a new dawn. I began to explore how to make passage across the ocean, to bring to birth this daring notion. We looked at our options, weighed up our choices, sought out advisors, heeded their voices of reason and concern, but we knew we must turn to the future and go. In the end, the merchant adventurers group offered the most probable route, a smart man called Thomas Weston, dressed in his smart suit, made all the arrangements. An agreement was signed wherein lay our hopes to leave our troubles behind. Mr. Cushman and I travelled to Southampton to make plans, to meet with Mr. Weston and all of his demands. He had talked us out of agreements to travel by sea with the New Netherlands and the Virginia companies, and so we opted to travel with his group, the Merchant Adventurers. Then he altered our initial agreement to suit his own business need, to ensure he'd retrieve the loan sooner than agreed. And he dragged his heels in finding us a ship, so we went ahead and purchased another to make our trip. The Speedwell was now in Leiden. We'd no longer tarry there because she'd carry the people from Leiden to England and to Southampton dock. Because of all these delays, it was a race against nature's clock. This was our reason. We were wanting to sail in good season. That is why we'd set this plan in motion, so that we'd not get caught in the storms out on the Atlantic Ocean.
I'm not too fussy who I carry on my ship. In and out of season, I don't ask too many questions, don't get involved in their reason, be it political or religious. Mind you, I'm not used to having this many humans on board. My Mayflower is a merchant ship where cargo is stored, making trips to France and bringing back cognac and wine. Ah, the scent is divine, and you can smell the history of this ship soaked into her timbers. We were berthed in Rotherhithe, but had now been commissioned by Thomas Weston for a group to transition from their life in Leiden to the American shore. And so to Southampton we'd head, pretty ladies galore. Most of the passengers were arriving by ship. A boat called the Speedwell would make the trip from Leiden, and we'd meet on Southampton ready for the next leg. So we set sail with the basics and many a keg. We spent a short time there in the heart of Southampton's bustling port before we would depart. At the West Quay both ships had perched. Supplies were gathered at the markets and prayers said at the Holyrood Church. It had been decided that even though the Mayflower was the larger, more experienced ship, the Speedwell would also make the trip. Before we set sail, Mr. Carver thought it better to read a letter that these travellers had received from back in Leiden. Their priest or whoever had decided not to go to the Americas, but wanted them to know he was praying for them, for success and favour. He wanted to teach them about their behaviour.
Dear Christian friends, from your pastor John Robinson, back here in Leiden but beside you in heart, my affections and thoughts are with you all. And with all my heart I salute your endeavour, and as you embark on this journey, may you never lose hope that I know you carry. I feel it my duty, and because of my love, that I share with you some wisdom from above of how to live as you now set sail, so that you will know success and you will never fail. First, daily confess your sins to the Father. I'd rather that you be pure and untainted by others. Confess what you know to be wrong, and then those secret thoughts that left unchecked can weigh you down and start to drown your ambition. God has called you to walk a higher path, so you must be purer for this task. Second, now right with God. Take every chance to be right with each other. Don't smother a brother or mistreat those that you're with. Keep peace, show love, have faith, and build up all around to be all that they can be. Don't cause offence with the things that you say, and then don't take offence when others pass it your way. Stand strong, be patient, trust in God, and He will help you each day with the right words to say. So be patient and kind in everything. Next up, be real with the love that you feel and profess to all who are on board. Look out for others' needs, not just yourself. Irrespective of wealth or position or power, seek every hour to do good to all around, and then you will be found as one who is trusted, and for being the salt and the light. Finally, my friends, as you join with those others, ensure good governance. Maybe take a lead to draw up agreements to which all should heed, so that in your new land you don't just wallow, but you establish good laws both for now and those who will follow. And so, I bid you farewell, and this is my prayer, that He who has made the heavens and the earth, the ocean upon which you are about to sail, will never fail to provide as He guides and guards you as you follow His call. And may we have reason to praise His name all the days. Fare you well, my friends. Fare you well.
It was August 15th when we left the West Quay, heading down Southampton water to the English Channel, but something was not right. Bad news from the Speedwell. She was not watertight. As open and leaky as a sieve, Mr. Cushman declared. She was going nowhere until she'd been repaired. So, we put in at Dartmouth, a port we thought best, just 75 miles west of Southampton. Not the best start. Some travellers lost heart as we had to stay there until the wind was set fair. Eventually, after these delays, which caused much malaise, at last came the day we could be on our way, heading off once again. Then, more bad news from the Speedwell. The first repairs were blown. She couldn't continue. We were 200 miles off Land's End when the leaks were found. Well, both ships turned around and now headed to the nearest port of Plymouth. All these troubles were taking their toll on the spirit and soul of the passengers who chose to travel. And now it seemed the plans unravelled before our eyes, and many decided that this was as far as they could go. By the time we left Plymouth, heading out to the open seas, we'd seen our number decrease until less than a sixth of the Leiden group remained. It was now September 6th, and the wind was right. Just the Mayflower set out alone. Her 3 masts and 6 sails were a sight to behold. She sailed strong and bold, 180 tons of craftsmanship, just over 100 feet long and 25 feet wide. Now with us pilgrims inside, crammed into the middeck, we bid England farewell. 51 men, 20 women, 3 expecting, 10 girls and 21 boys, altogether 102, plus the crew, all on the Mayflower. May God guard us well. Now, this wasn't what we'd originally had in mind, as we were soon to find that part of the arrangement for us sailing on this ship was that we had to agree to travel with those who did not believe. Drunk and debauched, sinners and thieves who did not share our faith in God or understand our way of life, which led to much strife. They were travelling for economic reasons and to set up colonies. We feared we would be faced with many dangers from this group of passengers that we came to call the strangers.
The journey was tough. Some of the roughest seas that the ship's master had ever seen. Ordinarily, this kind of crossing would have been made in the spring or the summer, which would bring calmer waters and better weather. But we were now sailing late autumn into winter. This was the reason, as this is known to be the stormy season. The ship was hammered by towering waves with a number of close shaves. Many became sick and were easy prey for teasing by the crew, who knew all too well the changing swell of the ocean deep. But then an odd thing occurred, so I heard, that one taunting sailor, who took great delight in tormenting the sick, himself became ill and died in a desperate plight. Of all people on board, a strange irony, you see. He always seemed fine. So maybe this was divine punishment. At least, that's what some believed. We were so tightly crammed into such a small space, encased in an echo of hell by the timber shell, with barely the room to stand upright in the lower deck where we were to stay for most of the days of our journey. The frustrations became too much for some. The pressure of being confined in that place, that suffocating space, for such a long time became too much to bear. A young man named John Howland, he decided, as he felt a moment of calm when the rocking subsided, that he'd venture out to the upper deck for a taste of fresh air. But as he did, the ship lurched leeward and he tumbled seaward. That could have been the end of him, but he spotted the topsail halyard, the rope used to raise the sail. So as he fell, he grabbed it and clung on for dear life until some of the crew hoisted him back on board, where he assured them that he'd not be out on the upper deck again. But not all were so fortunate. Just 3 days before we would see the new land, we lost a fine man, William Button, a servant on board. He was buried at sea, his soul now free. And then we sighted what our hearts had been longing to see.
The colour of the water began to change. The clouds rearranged on the western hand because we were nearing land. Master Jones, he spoke of how landlocked men will never know that scent in the sky when, after a long while at sea, almost too long to bear, you begin to breathe in a different kind of air. The wind carries a promise of earth. The salt smell changes to one of soil, making the long toil seem in a moment gone. And so we sailed on. Until on November the 9th, after 66 days at sea, we made landfall. And now for the first time we could see Cape Cod, and we thanked our God. The backside of the cape, rising 100 feet high, like it was touching the sky, the bold clay bluffs and the highland of Truro. Oh, the joy that we felt was like nothing before, because this was now the shore that we were longing to meet. It was agreed by all that there needed to be a unity amongst us if we were going to build a land where we could thrive, not just survive. And so, the Mayflower Compact was drawn up on a page and signed by the eligible gentlemen of a certain age, a document to inform our future relations and shape the constitution of a brand new nation. In the name of God, amen. We whose names are underwritten, the loyal subjects of our dread sovereign Lord and King James, by the grace of God, having undertaken for the glory of God and advancement of the Christian faith, and honour of our king and country, a voyage to plant the first colony in the northern parts of Virginia, do by these present solemnly and mutually in the presence of God and one of another covenant, and combine ourselves together into a civil body politic for our better ordering and preservation and furtherance of the ends aforesaid, and by virtue hereof to enact, constitute and frame such just and equal laws, ordinances, acts, constitutions and offices from time to time as shall be thought most meet and convenient for the general good of the colony, unto which we promise all due submission and obedience. In witness whereof we have hereunder subscribed our names at Cape Cod on the 11th of November in the year of the reign of our sovereign Lord 1620. And I, John Carver, was elected to be the first governor of this new people in this new colony. And so the ship was made ready, we prepared to moor against the fresh shore. This was the amen to our journey of hope.